Hey, it's Levi, welcome back. In today's video, we're gonna be taking this Marshall 1960 cabinet. We're gonna take everything off it, stripping it down to the bare bones, and I'm gonna show you every step of the way. I'm gonna be re-tolexing this cabinet and putting a new grill cloth on it. However, that project is another video. This one is just about stripping everything down. So let's get started. So one of the first steps that we have to do is take the corners off of the cabinet. So I'm gonna take my chisel, gotta kind of wedge it underneath there, hit it with a hammer a bunch of times, and then eventually I can fit in this trim removal tool, then I can wedge out each of the rivets. This is what the rivets look like. So basically you gotta do this process 8 times to take off all of your corners, and then we'll be ready for the next step, taking the anti-skid plates off of the top. So when it came to taking the anti-skid plates off the top of the cabinet, I made a crucial error. I pried the rivets out in the exact same method I had done for the corners. However, the anti-skid plates are a lot more brittle and they cracked on the corners. So if you're gonna do this, I definitely recommend drilling out the rivets so you don't wreck these parts, which are actually really hard to find. This old style is not made anymore, so I basically ruined a vintage part. Very good. So I got in contact with Marshall directly. They got me in touch with a Canadian supplier of their parts, which was pretty cool because I was able to order a pair of these anti-skid plates. However, the design has changed on these things. The old style, the one I have, has these recessed portions that fit into recesses on top of the cabinet, and I'm probably gonna have to fill those so I can put the new style, which is flat. If you use your brain, this whole thing that I ran into is totally preventable, and I encourage you not to break these if you can avoid it. Anyways, moving on to the next step. Next up, we're taking the back off the cab. This is a really simple step, just a whole lot of screws. One tip I definitely recommend is to use little baggies for the screws so you keep them all organized and you don't mix them up or lose them. And on the back here, we've only got 2 types of screws. One to hold the whole panel on, and then one to hold the jack plate on. And when you get to this stage, I definitely recommend taking a few pictures of the wiring, just so when you're reassembling it later, you can put it back exactly how it was before. And here's the grand reveal of the inside of the cabinet, where you can see the speakers and the wiring and all the inside stuff. The Tolex on the back of my cab was in really rough shape, so I just peeled it off. I didn't have to apply any heat or anything, but on some cabinets, the glue is on there really good, and you might need to use a heat gun to remove the Tolex. But for this cabinet, taking that Tolex off was a breeze. So just before we take everything out of this cab, we're just taking a good look at it, making sure we know where everything is gonna go back to. So that's basically what these shots are here for, just to kind of show how things are supposed to go back together later. I definitely recommend writing a little wiring diagram or something in your notebook so you're totally clear on exactly how the wiring is supposed to go. Next up, I'm taking off the handles. It's the exact same thing as taking off the back, it's just secured in there with screws, and then same deal, you want to sort these screws separate so you're not mixing them up with everything else. Some people like to upgrade the handles when they're doing a job like this. Mine seem to be fine, so I'm gonna run with them. However, it's definitely something to consider when you're upgrading a cab. Next up, I'm gonna lay it on its front to take off the speakers. I can take 2 off at a time because I got 2 hands to carry them to my little storage area. Once I've removed the speakers, I can start taking off this baffle. So the baffle is held in there with a bunch of screws as well. You just loosen them off. You don't even have to fully remove them from the baffle, but I decided to, just because I like to keep them separate, store them in the bags, just like I've done with everything else. Now, luckily, this was designed with the pieces of wood slotted in this way, so you can remove the baffle without removing these strips of wood. That is good design, my friends. So you just slide the baffle out just like that. It's super simple and a little bit dusty. All right, so this is what the baffle looks like when it's totally removed from the cab, and honestly, I think it looks kind of cool like that. When we put a new grill on this cab, we're gonna remove all those staples and then re-staple a new grill on it. I'm excited for that step of the process. Next up, we've gotta remove the piping. The piping is held on with a bunch of really small staples. So what I did to remove the staples is I took one of these little picks from this pick set I bought a little while back and some pliers, basically wedged this pick under the staple. Once it's got some room, you can grab it with some pliers. It's a little bit of a tedious process, but honestly, not hard at all. You just go around the cabinet, taking off each staple. Some people can be really careful and reuse the piping. However, I ordered brand new piping to go with the new Tolex and grill, so I'm not concerned about it. I just tore it out. We're almost about to tear this Tolex off. I'm just gonna take the wheels off real quick, and then we can start peeling. The Marshall 1960 cab comes with one piece of Tolex that wraps around the whole cabinet. So what I did is I just took it off like one surface at a time, and I took a little X-Acto knife and I cut the edges just to make it a little bit easier to remove. Again, it pulled off really simple, so I did not have to get a heat gun involved to remove the Tolex on this one. You can kind of get the main surfaces taken off pretty easily, but the front corners where the piping was a little bit more challenging. I found there was a little bit more glue involved there. I just went slow with that peeling process and got it all off. It was really simple and satisfying. As I was in the process of peeling that Tolex off, I was taking a look at the corners as well, and I figured I'd show you this. This is how they got that back corner in together. You can kind of see the shape of the Tolex, how it was cut and how it was folded to fit in that corner.
And now we are ready for the sanding process. So first I took my belt sander and tried to take care of all the major flat surfaces on the cab, and then I got to the edges. Some people say sanding is the worst part, but I would have to say this is the most satisfying part of the process because you get to see the wood underneath once you're all done. Now, yeah, it is just plywood, but ultimately it's really nice to kind of carve out that clean wooden cabinet underneath. Now, for sanding the inside of the cabinet, the part of it that you absolutely need to sand is each edge around the front and the back of the cabinet on the inside. However, I decided I would just go full at it and sand out all the flat surfaces on there as well, just so it looked cleaner. It's not totally necessary to do that, but at the same time, I just thought it would look kind of better that way, even though you're not very gonna see it because it's the inside of the cabinet. So I basically did 4 separate occasions of sanding. I first started off with all that kind of rough sanding, and then I did the finer sanding in separate sessions a little bit later on. I also had to sand the back panel of the cabinet. This step was made a lot easier by taking the heat gun and heating up all the glue before I took the belt sander to it. And once I got most of that stuff off, I was able to take the sheet sander to it just to get it all nice and smooth. And once we've got all this sanding done, we can sit back and look at the cabinet and see all of that wood underneath, all that black gunk that we were able to sand off. It may not be perfect, but it still looks pretty good. Once all the sanding is complete, we're ready to readdress that baffle and take the grill off of that once and for all. So we've got to remove a whole bunch of staples from the edges of the baffle. And then I just took a hairdryer to the JCM 900 emblem, and with a little bit of gentle prying, off it comes. And then I carefully pried the Marshall logo off the front of the grill. Now it's time to peel the grill off of the baffle. So that's what it looks like underneath. And now we finally have a fully stripped down Marshall 1960A cabinet. That sanding was a lot of work, but I think the result was worth it. If you want to see me put new Tolex on this cabinet, subscribe to my channel and check out some of the other videos on my channel. I think that about wraps it. I'll catch you on the next one.